Have you ever wondered what really makes a workplace tick? Well, there's a whole field of science for that, called industrial organizational psychology. But here's the thing, this field has a secret. It's got this identity crisis that's been brewing for decades. And today we're going to uncover it by looking at a place you'd probably never expect.
I mean, that's a pretty big question, right? For any discipline, its identity, its soul, is shaped by its big ideas, its most important thinkers, and the problems it decides to tackle. But how do you actually measure something like that? How do you map the very DNA of an entire field of study?
Well, a team of researchers decided to play detective. And their big idea was that the true identity of workplace psychology isn't hiding in some fancy lab. Nope, it's right here, hiding in plain sight, inside the introductory textbooks that every single student in the field has to read. This is where our investigation begins.
Okay, so to really get what these researchers were looking for, you first have to understand this central conflict that's right at the heart of IO psychology. It's this tension that has been pulling the field in two different directions for years. It's known as the science-practice divide. So on one side, you have pure academic science, where people are rewarded for publishing rigorous research in journals. On the other side, you have real-world practice, where people are focused on solving problems right now, things like hiring, team building, and burnout. And for decades, the big question has been, which of these two sides is really calling the shots? And just so we're all on the same page, IO psychology is basically the science of people at work. It's supposed to have one foot in rigorous science and the other foot firmly planted in the real world. Our little investigation here is about to reveal where it's actually standing.
So how in the world did these researchers track down a field's secret identity? Well, they decided to follow the paper trail. See, every single citation in a textbook is a clue. It's a breadcrumb leading back to the ideas and the people that the field considers most important. And the process they used was incredibly meticulous. First, they picked 6 of the most popular, most widely used IO Psych textbooks out there. Then, they painstakingly extracted every single citation from all 6 books to build one massive database. And finally, they crunched the numbers, analyzing who was being cited and, this is the crucial part, where those key thinkers actually worked.
And just to give you an idea of the scale we're talking about, their final database included work from over 8,600 unique authors. Yeah, this wasn't just a quick glance. This was a deep, forensic analysis of the field's collective brain.
All right, let's get to the first major clue they uncovered, and it's a big one. When you picture a science textbook, you probably imagine it's just full of citations from other dense, peer-reviewed academic journals, right? Well, the reality turned out to be a lot more interesting. The first clue was in the sources themselves. Among the most cited works, a whopping 39% are not from academic journals. Now, this is huge. It shows that students aren't just learning pure theory. They're getting a heavy dose of real-world perspective. That science-practice divide we talked about, inside these books, it's already starting to get really blurry.
And you can see it right here. You've got the academic heavy hitters, sure, but they're sitting right next to practitioner magazines like HR Magazine, business publications like Harvard Business Review, and even major news outlets like the New York Times. So the core knowledge isn't just coming from the lab, it's coming from the boardroom and the newsroom too. Okay, so that first clue was pretty surprising. But the second one? This is the real game changer. After looking at what was being cited, the researchers turned their attention to who was being cited. They wanted to know about the most influential thinkers, the academic rock stars of the field. And more specifically, they wanted to know their home base.
Just think about it for a second. For a field called industrial organizational psychology, you would absolutely expect the top experts to be working in university psychology departments, right? It just makes sense. But the data revealed something else entirely.
And here is the bombshell. Of the most cited authors, the field's biggest influencers, a clear majority, 58%, are in business schools. Only about a third are in psychology departments. Let that sink in. The core knowledge of IO psychology isn't primarily coming from psychologists anymore. It's coming from business professors.
The researchers put it pretty plainly. What this means is that the next generation of IO professionals are being taught and guided more by the world of management than by the world of traditional psychology. This isn't some small trend. It's a fundamental shift in the field's center of gravity.
So when you put all the clues together, the sources they cite, the authors they listen to, and where those authors work, a very clear picture starts to emerge. The secret identity of workplace psychology is that it's becoming less of a pure psychology and a whole lot more of a managerial science.
So what's the final verdict?
Well, first, the intellectual heart of the field has clearly moved to business schools, and that raises huge questions about its future. But the investigation also uncovered another equally critical secret. Even though women have been earning the majority of degrees in this field for years, a tiny 17% of the most cited, most influential authors are women. So, as the field is shifting its focus, it's also failing to recognize the contributions of its own majority.
And all of this leaves us with one final, big question. This migration to the business world isn't necessarily a good or a bad thing, but it is a profound change. The field might gain more practical relevance, more influence in the real world. But what could it lose? Could it lose its unique psychological foundation, the very thing that made it distinct in the first place? As the sign to the workplace keeps evolving, that is the billion-dollar question.